So as we go through, we're just going to kind of talk through a variety of different contexts. But we're really reaching out to you guys out of empathy. We've heard from a variety of you guys, and we say this with the kindness of our hearts that we're going to have some fun today and not take ourselves too seriously, but we recognize that this situation is quite serious, and as David said, maybe even existential for you. So,
all right. So what we have planned today is to talk about two subjects. We want to talk about leading in a time of crisis, and particularly talk about the way we want to show up as leaders, and talk about an understanding of what people are going through, so that you can think ahead a little bit about the way you might present yourself as we go through. So we'll get into some neuroscience and some of the things that we think will be valuable. And then Kerry is going to talk a little bit about some of the strategic decision making in these times of uncertainty, and give you some thoughts and some frameworks as the way to think about it. What's interesting, I probably have gotten at least 25 emails from people saying, hey, Scott, do you think the Bucha World's here? So as most of you know, if you've been in any of our classes in the last 10 years or so, we've been talking about this subject. I totally thought the disruption that we were going to face in the world was around technology and globalization, and we got a little piece of the globalization side of it, because it's clearly pretty rough waters that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lot of unprecedented, a word that's being used a lot today, but clearly this idea of Bucha is real in our lives right now, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. As all of you know, Kerry and I spend a lot of time monitoring different resources. And I will tell you right now, we're almost overloaded with stuff coming in. And, you know, the sort of asynchronous, here's the 5 ways to do this, the 5 ways to do that. And I can imagine when you've got a lot of real-time things going on, you may not be able to monitor those. So one of the things that we are trying to do is be the curators, to try to look at what's the best stuff out there, what are the things that really resonate with us, and we will continue to provide those. But over the course of the session today, we will give you some of our favorites that we're following right now to give you that idea. But pretty straightforward, the things that we would like to get across today that are pretty universal in all of the things that we're thinking about is, number one, and we'll get into the brain science behind this, but people are anxious today. The anxiety levels are high for good reason, and we're going to talk about that, but it is a time to be empathetic, to be compassionate to people, and we're going to hit this over and over again, but you cannot over communicate during this time. So think about that from a leadership perspective. It's time to really be empathetic. The second thing, all of you know this too, but is that emotions are contagious, and how you show up will literally be viral to everybody around you. And it really is important to be calm, but also to be yourself, to be honest, to be vulnerable. You're human, but we will, you know, that contagion of being, everybody's watching you for their emotional cues, and it's really important.
And one of the things I would add, this is just kind of fun for me, but we're in the middle of a virus, right? So how about if we become this virus of optimism? Because I think in the end, you know, we're going to come out of this. It's going to be, we may take 6 months off, we may take a month off. I have no idea, and I'm not going to get into the politics of how long this is going to last or the severity of it. But what I know is we will get out of it. We'll come through the other side. And there was this great thing in the old Jim Collins book that did great about it. It was called the Stockdale Paradox. And the Stockdale Paradox is we got to confront the brutal realities of what's going on today, but be absolutely optimistic that we will prevail in the end. We will prevail in the end. As leaders, our job is to have that virus of optimism, that virus of empathy, that virus of calmness. And there's all kinds of other, you know, anxious, the anticipation of worst case scenarios is out there. And I want to talk about worst case scenarios in some case, but we gotta be this virus of optimism. And I want to put the V, this is out of a McKinsey article yesterday, but I want to put the V in recovery. And we're going to put V in recovery because we're going to figure out how to do the scenario planning and just sort of the next 3 points, and then we'll get into some of the content. But we got to preserve cash and all kinds of different ways of doing that. But just to touch on a couple of ideas, this is a great time to renegotiate with your landlord. It's a great time to renegotiate with your vendors. Getting paid in traditional 15 or 30 days, probably not going to happen right now. So I'm not telling you not to pay your landlord, but every chance you get, renegotiate and figure out how to put off cash, because I really believe this. There's going to be some huge winners that innovate, that learn how to pivot, and learn how to take advantage of this crisis in a way that's positive and optimistic. But you're not going to be able to do that without cash. So we'll come back and maybe do a little bit more. We'll get into this scenario planning and sort of creating the range of opportunities. And you guys have seen the A scenarios, and the Bs and the Cs, the D scenarios. And I want to think about what is the best strategy for each of what's the best we can possibly, if we come out of this in 2 weeks, if we come out of this in a month, if we come out of it in 6 months, but if it takes 2 years, what are those scenarios for cash? What are those scenarios for leadership? One of the things we got to talk about, by the way, you got to keep training people. Yep, you got to keep training people. You got to keep building capacity. You got to keep growing and developing. And one of the things that we'll talk about later is people really still want to develop. And even though we're in crisis, this great article, a great book about the progress principle by Teresa Mobley says people want to still make progress in spite of this. And we're going to innovate. And how are we going to pivot the business? And truthfully, wonderful opportunities for pivot. Wonderful. One of the guys, I think it's online right now, is David Duran. Couldn't be better positioned. David, CEO of a company called Meritech. They've invented this thing that's instant and almost perfect hand washing. Boy, should we be investing in Meritech right now? I'm probably giving David a wrong plug, but he's probably overwhelmed. But there are I was watching Bloomberg this morning. Bizarrely, Herman Miller is blown up. They're so successful because people are ordering Aeron office chairs to have in their home. We all had the office chairs at work. Now we gotta build an office at our home. So there are great opportunities, but it may require that the way you've been doing business is not the way you're gonna do business. And what we've been doing is not going to be good enough for tomorrow. As we go through this, we start talking about it from a leadership point of view. We also got to talk about it from an innovation, sort of a design thinking point of view. What are those opportunities, and how do we, Todd Porch said this question, but how do we play defense where we have to play defense with our cash, and offense where we have to think about where we're going to be when we start emerging from this crisis, and where we want to position ourselves so we are at the best we can be, both personally and organizationally, to put the V in recovery. Yeah, that's McKinsey.
So I just want to chime in here for those of us, or for those of you who are joining us a little bit after the start of the meeting. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so on the chat feature. I want to hold up a comment that Lorinda Pang made when you were talking about perpetual optimism or optimism. Lorinda says that a quote she's been using with her team often comes from Colin Powell, that perpetual optimism is a force multiplier.
Great.
And so shout out to Lorinda there on the chat, Fred. But if you have a question or comment, feel free to shoot it into me, and I will try to interject it.
Force multiplier. Thanks, Lorinda.
Thanks, Lorinda. So for those of you who have ever been in one of my discussions on the brain, this slide will be very familiar to you. But I think it's really important to understand at this point what people are going through. And when I talk about anxiety, what happens is when we're feeling the pressure from the outside world, basically we have a chemical cocktail go through us, primarily driven by cortisol, which is the stress hormone, that drives us to basically move from, at the very lowest end of this spectrum, from being very open and very calm. And as the pressure or the anxiety or the outside pressure dials up, we close ourselves off. And what that happens is we don't have the same access to our cognitive resources. We don't have the same access to our ability to empathize and connect with people. So what's happening out in the world right now is we can kind of focus on the middle three as being critical. And I'd like you to envision a good metaphor of this is a railroad track with One track being people worried about their actual health, their physical health. And the other one is people worried about their financial health. And these two are in parallel. And while there's both going on at the same time, people are worried about this. They're worried about one or the other. And you can think about level one as being, hey, I'm just generally aware that in the world things are happening. So I'm generally aware that there are health issues out there in the world. There are financial issues out there in the world. And at this point, I'm alert. And I'm leaning in to think about what happens. As this gets closer, just metaphorically, we're now in the neighborhood instead of the broad perspective. As it gets closer to us, we are going to get more alarmed about this. And we're going to see people get sick. We're going to see people close to us or in our near circles are going to be, lose their jobs, get worried about their financial situation, et cetera. I was talking to some people the other day and I said, what's on your mind? What are the things that you're worried about right now? And a lot of them were carrying around, well, my son just got laid off. I'm worried about him. And so, people are walking around with their heads full of anxiety around one or the other of these. And then when we get to level 3, now it's upon us. Now it's happened to somebody close to us. It has happened to us potentially. And all of a sudden now we are really have got a lot of cortisol. We've lost a lot of IQ points. We are not able to, Kerry loses IQ points regularly, but
good thing she got a lot to spare.
Yeah,
It's like hair.
Yeah, it's just,
Hold on.
what the heck.
There goes 10.
But anyway, you can see that I think putting yourself in the other person's shoes in this situation and understanding where they're coming from. One other important thing about this is people go up and down this spectrum at different rates.
Right.
Some people will move up and down here quickly. Some people will move more slowly. Everybody is going to move through this hierarchy at a different pace. So it's very helpful to ask people how they are and where are you and begin to put yourself into that. But I guess the bottom line is don't expect people to be behaving normally in this time. And it is very, very important to be empathetic from that perspective.
Just add a couple of further edification points. But how many of you felt, for me, I can tell you exactly the day. It was a week ago Friday, graduation day, hoodie day for cohort 72. And I felt like 9/11. I felt like 9/11 because we were told to go home, take our stuff home. We're not coming back to work. We're teaching online. The world's going to hell. And I've literally, and if you remember how you felt on 9/11, it was a kick in the gut. And I went home that night and literally talked to my wife about this, but I was depressed. And I'm not a depressed kind of a guy, but I was depressed. I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut. I felt, this whole scarf model that we're talking about, but I literally felt all of those things. And I read a book oftentimes. It's a book called The Happiness Advantage by a guy named Sean Aker, and some of you guys have heard me talk about this. But Sean Aker says, for everything that kicks you in the gut, you got to find 3 things called the Losado principle. It's only true for the bell curve, but the Losado principle says we got to find 3 things to be celebratory about, to be grateful for, to be proud of, knowing that we're going to get through with this force multiplier of optimism. Thank you, Lorinda. But we're going to get through this. But we got to recognize some of us will get through that depression quickly. Scott said it. Some of us, it's going to take a while. And as your daughter gets laid off and you got to provide daycare and you got to maybe put some money out of your pocket to help some member of your family, it's going to hurt in the short run. But if we have this force multiplier of optimism and know that there's so many good things that have happened and will happen to us in the future, we're going to get through it.
Thanks for that.
Sorry.
So many of you are familiar with the SCARF model. Talked about this a lot in the past. It's a model out of the Neuro Leadership Institute and David Rock. But I think it provides a really good framework for us to think about things right now. And basically, for those of you who haven't seen this, it basically says essentially our limbic system of our brain is constantly scanning the world for threats or opportunities, threats or rewards. and asking yourself, is there anything that's going on right now like anything I have in the past? And is it something that I should go away from or move towards? And in David Rock's model, the SCARF model talks about 5 different dimensions on which we can be, from a social perspective, be pushed one way or the other. One thing to mention on this is that our away or our threat responses is about 4 to 5 times more stronger than a toward response. So we tend to move with the threat responses. Now you'll notice that I've got 3 in the middle highlighted for a couple reasons. Number 1, they tend to be the most strong. And number 2, they are the ones that are most in play right now. And the very highest is this idea of certainty. And what it says is we as human beings are hardwired to like predictability and certainty. And when you can't predict what's going to happen ahead of you, it makes us very anxious. So you can imagine, back to my 2 rails that I talked to just a second ago, people are sitting there going, what's going to happen with my physical health? What's going to happen with my financial health? What's going to happen in my family? I can't predict. It's driving me crazy. I had a person say to me the other day, I thought was interesting, I just wish I could go out a year and look back and see what happened. But that's a little bit of this whole.
There's an invention.
Yeah, that would be a good invention if we could.
Back to the future.
But I'll come back to this. But just keep in mind that people need some level of predictability. And when you're looking out into the horizon, and I don't know when this is going to end, and I don't know what it's going to look like, it puts a lot of us really off balance. And just keep that in mind, because I'm going to come back to some recommendations about how can you make things a little bit more certain, even in these difficult times. The second one is autonomy, which is a way of saying we like to have some level of control. Again, we don't have many, we are not very much in control right now. There are some things we can control, and there's some things that we can't control. And as I'll talk about in a minute, we need to keep people focused on the things that they can control and not get over anxious about the things we can't control. And finally, relatedness. We are social beings as humans, and we are now being asked to be socially isolated. And people's routines of being at the office and all of the things that we are experiencing right now go against our fundamental herd mentality of relatedness. And so we need to be thinking about, as leaders, what can I do to create virtual relatedness? What can I do to have people still be able to connect even if we're doing it virtually? So you can imagine those 3 in particular. The other 2 I think are going to come into play a little bit later, maybe for a future episode. But for right now, thinking about the anxiety that is currently residing in our people's heads around certainty, autonomy, and relatedness are very important. So let me give you a couple of resources. Some of you may be familiar with Vern Harnish. Vern wrote the book Scaling Up, and he has got some fantastic resources. If you go to scalingup.com, his focus is on on growing businesses, essentially. Businesses that are in scaling up mode. He's got some fantastic just recommendations. They come in every day that are basically, here you're a small business owner, you are scaling, what are the things that you should be thinking about right now? Just a couple I'd like to amplify. His thought of the day today was about communication. He said, your KPI, your key performance indicator for communication is your KPI should, how many people did you reach out to today? Experts, your family, your colleagues, etc. And how can I,
Your landlord, your banker.
yeah, everybody, how can I basically up the number of connections? He says, you're not going to solve this problem by thinking, so talk to lots of people, communicate a lot. And he recommends also having it be a scheduled, maybe even twice a day check-ins. So just, I think, one of those ideas that both helps, I think, a little bit with the certainty side of things. Conversation I would recommend you having is hey, everybody, we don't know what's going to be happening 2 months from now, but we do need to know what we need to get done today. So let's get focused on that. Another one that came up, and I don't know if Adam Contos is on this line. Adam is the CEO of Remax, and he produces some great material. He was talking about number 3, clean up and catch up. You know, we need a little bit of, what's that?
Adam's on.
Adam, hi Adam. Thank you for this, but the whole idea that we get a little dopamine bump when we accomplish something, when we achieve something. And so I have it on my list that someday I'm going to actually clean the garage over the next couple of weeks, but some of those, how do I get myself organized? How do I get myself to accomplish some things that I can do and feel the dopamine bump? I think the rest of these are pretty self-explanatory, but just again, Vern Harnish and Scaling Up is a great resource.
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
I just add, you know, I use a lot of this material, and there's a book called Traction that the guy Gino Wickman took a lot of the stuff from the Rockefeller Habits. But we used to say you should have a daily huddle, a daily stand-up, and a 5-minute, a weekly meeting. And the fact that we're not meeting face to face does not mean that we shouldn't be meeting. You got to do that. And here's what I found you know, I'm saving a crap load of time by not driving to Starbucks and having meetings. I don't have to schedule them, and I don't have to drive, and I don't have to wait in line and, you know, please get my Starbucks stock back up there. But the fact is I'm saving a lot of time by not driving, and I'm actually finding more time to meet and to spend more time with people I really want to be engaged with. And I'm using Zoom. I'm using the heck out of Zoom because I like to look at people in the face. I don't like to just use the phone. So I think this communicate daily and this community customer support to clean up, all this stuff is so important. We can't let it slide because we don't, you know, you got to celebrate people's birthday parties, even if you're not in the same room.
Yeah.
You got to celebrate people's anniversaries and work anniversaries. And we got to find a way to stay in touch with our teams, even more so because they're working from home and working in isolation. There's so much that can be done with this, but it takes a little bit of effort to say, I'm not going to just sit in my pajamas. I'm going to Zoom in with, you know, 6 of my favorite students next week.
So Scott and Kerry, for folks on the call who do have the capacity to connect by video call via, you know, Zoom, Skype, Teams, whatever, how much more valuable is that than, say, an email or, you know, an asynchronous form of communication?
It's huge, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but
That's a great question.
I think as leaders that we should really think through what are the communication norms that we are going to establish with our team and say, these are the norms for email, these are the norms for video calls, these are the norms, and rethink your communication norms and let people know. I think people will go crazy sitting behind email thinking this is the way my connection to the world. It's just too impersonal, and you know,
Emails,
seeing people's faces, being able to read, you know, it's amazing to me. I can read faces through Zoom very, very well.
Yeah.
You can tell what's on somebody's mind, and you can get a little deeper.
So can I read a couple of audience comments on this one with regards to the face-to-face based on what you're saying in the question? Kathleen Matanowitz says it's highly valuable. Bill Johnson said, another thing we are doing on Zoom is to embrace the abnormality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Introduce your kids, your dogs.
Yeah.
Wear a funny hat.
Beautiful.
Be you and make it personal and fun. And then Dwayne McFadden says, we have been encouraging coffee chats, creating a virtual coffee shop and just spending 30 minutes connecting, and it's working.
That's great.
Just make sure you bring your Starbucks coffee to that.
I did hear a great one the other day that was fun, that the team decided to have a happy hour. So at 4 o'clock, the boss scheduled pizzas to show up at everybody's house at the same time. And the doorbell rang, of course, have a pizza and said, oh, so we're going to spend a half an hour having pizzas and beers, and we're not going to talk about work for the next half an hour. Yeah. Those are kind of fun things that you can do that just allow people to stay connected, and it's back to the whole relatedness thing. So this is another one that came out the other day that I liked a couple of the metaphors here. But this idea of paint bright lines. from a metaphorical perspective, if you sort of even look at that picture and think, my role as a leader is to create, here's where we're going, at least in the short, medium term, give people that picture, let them know what their guardrails are, let them know what the lines are, and then let them do their thing. We can't control everybody in these times. If our tendency when we get stressed is to get in control, it's not going to work. So our role as leaders, set a vision. Here's where we're going. Here's the boundaries. Go make things happen. I think there's some real power in that picture.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I think we have to talk about Simon Sinek why. We got to talk about mission, purpose, guardrails, and truthfully, we got to talk about what not to do. The part of the Simon Sinek of why is this is why we do what we do, and this is also why we say no to stuff that's really going to take us down the wrong. But I think Scott's absolutely right. Boy, we got to focus on strategy. We got to focus on mission. We got to focus on purpose. And I think as a leader, our role is, man, you got to reiterate it twice a day, and every chance you get, even with pizza.
Yeah.
Can I interject a few more things in here? This is a little bit from the last conversation strand, but Heather North says, we're doing happy hours. Todd Porch says,
Hi, happy hour.
the big question around the virtual boom is how we keep the engagement up as this drags on to, say, day 39. Will it look and feel a lot different than, say, day 9? Another person said, I'm doing virtual happy hours twice a week, 30 minutes work and 30 minutes fun. Next week, I have a comedian coming in via Zoom.
Nice.
Which is really, really interesting. And then another person, or same person, Tim Esplin, said he started out doing this once a week and he was asked to do it more often because it definitely works.
Yeah.
So thanks for all the input, everybody.
Thanks for that. That's fantastic. And I think what's interesting with all of this too is back to this question, Todd's question about day 39. I'm, as most of you know, I'm a big believer in cadence and rhythm and routine and habits. And what I think we ought to be thinking about right now in week 1 is, what do we want that cadence to be? What are the things that we can do to make it start feeling more natural to people? Because I agree with you, Todd, that things might start falling off if everything's novel all the time. But if we can begin into and even within the struggles people have at home with kids around and everything else, if I can know, hey, every day at 10 o'clock, I've got a call, very, very important. So let's schedule around that. It helps you organize things at home around that cadence. And so I do believe we are habitual creatures. We like to get back to that stage of my life is somewhat predictable, and I know what's going to happen today. So that's my prediction, is that people are going to begin to get comfortable with a new routine.
Absolutely.
Just another one to think about in this whole area of autonomy and control is that it's really easy to get fixated on all of the stuff that's going on in the world, and you can have Fox News or MSNBC going full time in the background, and you can live in this world of thinking adversity. I would suggest from a control perspective, cutting that off. Obviously, we have to keep ourselves informed, but think about the things we can control. If you have people that are highly anxious, I will tell you, I've talked a few people off the cliff in the last week. It's great to have people to be your pressure relief valve, that you can explode to them, but ultimately, okay, those are all things that we should be worrying about, but these are the things you can control. Let's stay focused on the things you can control. Let's put off decisions that are so hard right now because they're unpredictable. Deal with what you can deal with. So back to this idea of focusing on what you can control.
Just one thing I'd add to that, he talked about, I don't care which news source you get, you got to watch out, because what they've proven is that news, reality TV, things like that, are about 25 negative impressions for everything that's good and sort of happy optimism. And if you watch enough TV, you will go into depression. It's just sort of it's an unfortunate fact of reality. Catch up on the news, watch whatever you need to do for 30 minutes, but boy, take a break, go outside, walk the dog, hang out with your virtual buddies on a pizza party. But if the too much TV right now, it's just like 9/11. And I'll tell you one thing that happened to me at 9/11 is I watched too much TV and got depressed. And I've got kick in the gut. And then finally you turn off TV and go for a walk and you realize, you know what? There's still a blue sky out there. There's still mountains that I love, and there's still a family that I adore. Life is still pretty good. It's tougher. It's change. It's not something that's a predictable thing, but we're going to keep moving forward. So just to reiterate, turn off the damn TV.
So there's a comment from the last trend and a new question that has been asked. Jessica McNaughton says, Scott and Kerry, thanks so much.
Jessica.
Thanks so much for organizing this discussion. The opportunity for innovation and the building of new systems during this time is huge. I think we're going to see an uprising of care and the spirit of resilience around the world. Awesome. And the opportunity to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. is now exciting. And then she tacks on, shout out to number 66.
Yeah.
Andrew McCulston asks, any and all suggestions on keeping culture up and in a good place when you have to lay off employees during the season and you can't talk to the current team face to face? So pose that question. I have more.
So if you culture is a big deal. Culture, I've gotten way too deep on this whole cultural thing these days. How you live and how you make decisions and how you act right now is your culture. And I worked for Starbucks during 9/11. I probably shouldn't say that too much now, but I loved it because the culture of Starbucks, Howard Schultz and Orrin Smith, who was the chairman CEO at the time, they were absolutely focused on keeping the culture alive during those really, really tough times after 9/11. Our job is to keep that culture alive. Jessica, I think what a leader has to do now is reinforce culture, not abandon it. Reinforce it by more meetings, reinforce it again by who you hired. And we're going to have these layoffs. I mean, layoffs are an unfortunate reality. And when you're doing the synergies of layoff, we're going to have some mergers in the oil and gas industry. We're going to have some mergers in the airline industry. The synergies mean that people are going to lose some jobs. Those synergies mean that people lose their job. We got to keep the culture in spite of the fact that some perfectly good people are going to be out looking for a different career. And our job as leaders is to keep that sort of optimism going in the tough cultural times. Question from the audience.
Yes, Andrew says thank you.
I have another piece to that, but go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things that we know for sure is that there's a really strong correlation between transparency and trust.
Oh, I love this.
And I think you need to be as honest and tell people what's going on. One of the tricks that you can do, it's not a trick, but to be absolutely open with the books and talk about liquidity and say, listen, we've been doing projections. Here's where our revenue numbers are coming. Here's where our collections are. Here's where our cash position. Here is our liquidity situation based on different predictions. This is our cash situation. Be open with that, and ultimately, if you have to have layoffs in order to conserve cash, do it with honor. Do it with, hey, listen, this is a situation where we're not going to make payroll next month if we don't take some actions. But be absolutely honest. And that's a cultural dimension of that whole picture. The worst thing you can do is be opaque, and then people start not trusting you, and then it's really a difficult situation.
So I'm going to jump around for the audience here a little bit on the chat feature to save time. 2 comments, and then I'll close or leave off the question here. So from Jim Altman.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim. How are the kids?
As leaders in a situation where we have little control, we need to be centered up, not too high or not too low on emotions. And then from Todd Porch, the openness for change in scenarios like this are great. Take full advantage of them. I brought up a number of things this week with our senior team that had been dismissed only months ago. They were welcomed with a spirit of innovation now. Yeah. And so those are 2 comments. And then Heather North asked this question: how do we plan for the possibility of our workforce getting sick? Is now the time to try to cross-train?
So we're going to let's just get to it. We got a scenario plan. And one of the things that we're scenario planning is succession planning. people dropping in, dropping out, people show up and not show up, and layoffs.
Yeah.
So Heather, we got a scenario plan. You got a plan for all kinds of
Exactly.
and everybody in your organization is, you know, we talk about this, but each one of your business units needs to do their scenario plan, their succession planning, and you got to keep developing people. You got to keep growing people. You can't stop the development of people and succession planning, but that's a part of your scenario. And if this stays in and we lose people and we have to lay off, well, that's part of scenario planning. Every one of your business units and each silo, each part of your organization inside those business units must do some scenario planning based on some of these big buckets. You know, big buckets being we're out of this, and Easter we're out of this, on Labor Day we're out of this, on Memorial Day we're out of this, on 4th of July. I don't know, but we need those scenarios that are sort of A, B, C, and D scenarios, best case, worst case, and everybody in our silos, everybody in our organization, and everybody in our business units needs to partake in deep and part of this is innovation. I think this is a ripe, I love pork. This is a ripe opportunity to pivot some of the things that weren't working into some of the things that were working. I was talking to a guy named Dr. Bruce Evans, who's an ER doctor at St. Joe's, and cohort 50 something, 62. He was 62. But Bruce says, you know, this is weird. Kids should never go to school. Teenagers should never go to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. Great. So guess what? Now they're not going to school at all until whenever they wake up. That's what teenagers ought to be doing. Why don't we pivot when we come out of this crisis with a slightly modified education system so that teenagers are going to school at appropriate time of day? This is that's a weird little example, but it's a huge opportunity to think about where should we pivot as we put our foot on the accelerator to bust our Formula One car out of this recession.
Yeah, there's an old adage that says, "Don't waste a good crisis," right? And you know, to Todd's point, things like from some of the work that I've done in the healthcare industry, they've struggled to get telemedicine to be real, right? As a good example, telemedicine has been something that people have had a hard time getting it into their workflows and figuring out how to make it, and it's sort of lived alongside. I would argue that we could come out of this crisis and telemedicine could be front and center in the way that we deliver healthcare going forward. Just another example of not wasting a good crisis in order to make things happen.
So we got a bunch of questions coming in here. I'm going to have to start skipping comments and just go to questions in order to, but thanks for a very engaged audience here. One question comes from Bob Kungai. How do you talk with younger workers, current students, and other folks who have no memory of anything other than a great job market?
Talk to the guys that graduated in 2008
or 2001.
Yeah,
or 1999 with the.
Yeah, I mean, I think again the whole. I don't know that I have a good answer except this too will pass, and that you know we have to work our way through this. We can understand and be empathetic to their anxiety, and just you know we've got to wait until things are a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the great things that builds teams is a common enemy, and we know from lots of research on this that we all have our organizations have a common enemy, and we learn from adversity. And if this is your first really nasty adversity, thank you. My IQ dropped a little bit with my stress there. We're going to bring back the IQ. But if this is your first big sort of tragedy in your life, sorry. And this is what builds people. It builds character. And I don't look for adversity in order to build character. But when we have adversity, you can tell the people who have character and who were raised right by their mothers, right, Porch?
So Andrew Graham asks,
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
How would you present that we are merging with a local competitor? It is well in the works and a good idea. How do you present reality and make it? How does the present reality makes it look like a Hail Mary, which it will be if financial support does not arrive? So.
Yeah, it's interesting because the M&A markets to a great degree have fallen apart, except for really good strategic combinations in this day and age. And I know, Andrew, I know your business well enough to know that is going to be an important business. It's one that, I think you could argue you need scale, that this has been in the works, that it makes even more sense as a result of the things that are going on. We now we can come out of this stronger. And, how exciting that we had this going before this happened. Again, I'm a big believer to being transparent to the degree you can, and just being honest. And this is the world.
Go back one slide, will you? And one more. Yeah, paint the bright lines. So we're talking about strategy. We're talking about mission. We're talking about purpose. And Andrew, just to further edify, it's really this is the message of what we're doing, and this is the right strategy. And it's serendipitous to this horrible recession, horrible crisis. But the fact is, it's serendipity. But it's part of our big term strategy. You guys are big in the healthcare industry, and this is just getting you deeper and more successfully in an industry which has huge tailwinds from a macro force behind it.
Right.
So should we skip the slides and just do the questions? I'm okay with it.
I'm sort of liking this question. Thanks.
So there are a lot of really affirmative comments coming in, and what I'll say to the audience is every one of these comments of affirmation, I will make sure Scott and Kerry hear after we go off the air. I'm going to try to stick with the questions. So Andrew McCusker asked again, we own a children's swimming business with 100+ locations around the country. All are closed. Any perspective on when small businesses will be able to come back online?
I can't answer the when at all. We don't know. It would be foolish of us to make a prediction, but I want to go back to some design thinking things. So first of all, I'm going to start with empathy. I'm terribly sorry. Nina's on the line, and Nina's got 4 orange theories that have to be closed, and we get it. And so start with empathy. The next thing is again, preserve cash. I would also ask, what are you going to do to maybe pivot slightly? Is there any way you can start getting some cash flow without being reopened? Is there another market for what you've got? Another market for some of your employees? Is there, what can you do that might create an innovation? Given the assets that you have and the opportunities that you have in our current environment, what might you take advantage of? How might you take advantage to pivot slightly? And to be more specific would be tough. We'd have to get into the weeds with your business a little bit, but we need to think deeply about what is that emerging market looking like? What's the need? Design thinking, which I want to just touch on real quickly, says the first thing you do in design thinking is look for pain. Well, there's a lot of pain. I can't get food. I can't get groceries. I can't get my restaurant. I can't get, I can't get my haircut, right? Yeah, that's not a blessing, but I can't.
I was going to say,
I can't go to the dentist.
When are you going to do that?
Yeah, well, I was going, but yeah. So did I tell you I was depressed? So you can't.
You just need that ponytail.
So ponytail's coming back. What can you do? And so design thinking says, look for pain, look at empathy, look at all of the world that's changing, and when the winds of change start blowing, can you build a windmill instead of digging a hole? But what is that pivot that you might take now to help with the cash flow, and then really think about how to come out of this with maybe a different design of the business, so you can come out earlier, you can come out sooner, you can mitigate some of the risks. And again, I think innovation is such a key. Just to finish up the design thinking, just a reminder, innovation, it's like the scientific theory. You got to first look for pain, observe pain, not too hard to do, but get your teams to start creating empathy maps and hassle maps for what's going on in the world. Brainstorm and ideate. I think the online ideation process with Teams, with Zoom, getting whiteboards and using all kinds of other material is a fun opportunity to ideate. We got to figure out how to do some fast prototyping, the minimum viable prototyping, and test this stuff. And basically, the 5 steps of design thinking are empathy, observe, ideate, test, and prototype. Let's go.
So Sheil Samuel asked this question, and it's seconded by Laura Jacobson. Another consideration: we have a new option that wasn't as prevalent as before. We can step some key folks down from W-2 to fractional gig workers instead of jumping to layoffs in all scenarios. It allows us to retain talent while relieving payroll pressure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I was on a meeting today about this, and again, I go back to what I was talking about. Look at your liquidity, be open about your liquidity, and say, listen, we can't make payroll next month at the current rate. What we can do is move you to a bit worker. We can give you some hours. We'd love to keep you adding value to the business until we can afford back. There is just basically be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to go. The business that I was talking to earlier today is going to do that. Is going to do exactly what you said. Going to move a couple of people into doing bit work while their full-time job is just not needed.
But that's preserving cash on both sides. I can either get laid off, or as an individual, I got to preserve cash too, right? So we have commercial landlords and individual landlords, whatever that looks like. So we got to preserve cash. So rather than getting laid off, I'd rather preserve cash by having at least some gig work, if nothing else. One of the things that, there are so many paradoxes in this, in what's going on in today, and we got to think about how to celebrate those paradoxes, because there's going to be, I think there will be some wonderful opportunities for mergers. Restaurant business, there's going to be some mergers. Come on, there's the retail world, going to be some mergers. That's not a bad thing in my mind. It's going to be good or bad is not really the way to think about it, but you don't want to be the victim of a merger. You want to be playing, like Port said, you want to play offense on these mergers. Who can you merge with to preserve cash, to think about the pivot, to think about how to expand our business? So what are the assets that you have, even if, like with Nina, Newcomb, Corcoran Newcomb, you got the assets that are closed. What are those assets? How might you use those assets in a different way? How might you merge your business with somebody else's, so the day that the gyms get reopened, we're ready to go with better cash flow than ever?
Yeah.
So interesting thing on the chat board, some people are commenting and answering other people's comments, which is really
Nice.
dynamic.
Love
I love
that.
it.
Love that.
Dave Oliver asked the question, what advice do you have for businesses that are trying to balance health and safety of employees with business continuity when working from home isn't practical?
Full body condoms, David. That was in Sleeper. Remember the movie Sleeper? Never mind. Woody Allen movie. David, that is not my area.
Now I can't think. Sorry.
I just killed a couple of IQ points. So you're in the manufacturing world, you're in the engineering world, and I don't know how you do manufacturing. Although I will tell you, robotics, artificial intelligence, augmented reality. You're in an engineering world that I don't even understand, David, so I can't get deep on that one. But we got to take advantage of robotics, augmented reality, the drone stuff, the delivery. I was watching a video. They're hiring literally 100,000 people at Amazon and Walmart right now. And this is bizarre as heck, but they showed them all in a room yesterday getting trained to deliver to Amazon, and they were shoulder to shoulder like they were at a movie theater. In fact, I think they were at a movie theater. So that's insane. We have got, as leaders, to step up and say, we're going to separate, we're going to create different time schedules. You come in at 2 and I can leave at 2, and we're going to share desks after we Clorox the heck out of that. But we got to figure out some creative, innovative ways so you're not shoulder to shoulder and you're using by the way, I hate social distancing as a term. I'm just going to say this. I think one of our great leaders is I'm not sucking up to Jeremy Heffner. Yeah, I am. He's our chancellor right now. Thank you. Yeah. But it's not social. We want to not social distance. We want to be socially closer, but we want a physical distance. So let's think about physical, not social distance. It's the wrong term. Should have never been out there. Physical distance is the right thing, and physical proximity is the right thing. We want to socially get closer to people.
Yeah. I think just one more thing on that, Dave. I was talking to somebody in the construction business, and back to the dual track rail metaphor. People are going to have health questions, health anxiety, and financial anxiety, and to the degree that this person was in the construction business, they said, people are dying to work. We're in an outdoor environment. I think it's safe to work. We think we can make it safe to work, but we're going to have some rules. And what we can't do is make people come to work sick, make people work close together. We've got to think through how to do that. but people, so we've got to watch that fine balance, I think, between keeping people healthy, thinking about the financial side of it, and just do it safely.
But we got to keep people working. Just not working is not a good answer right now. It's going to hurt. There's so many industries right now that are accelerating because there are tailwinds behind certain industries, including things like construction.
Like, why didn't I invest in Zoom?
Why did I invest in Zoom?
Yeah. So I just want to make a comment here for folks as we're closing in on coming to the end of the meeting here shortly. This is kind of your last call for a question. If you have a burning question, get it up on the chat board and I'll try to get it in for you. There is one comment that I want to read from here because it is totally germane to what you guys were saying earlier, and it had to do with the scaling down from W-2 to contractor status. Colin Doherty says, just keep in mind that the transition to gig workers may not work in all states, especially California. Mm-hmm. And then he goes on to talk kind of extensively about that. If you're interested in that comment, go to the chat board. You can read his comment.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah. So kind of closing comments, and I'll look here for any further questions that come in, but this is kind of last call for everybody.
I'm just going to go forward to our summary slides.
So I want to just take a stack and thank our director producer, Patrick Orr, who helped.
You're here, Patrick. Thank you.
He's got a perfect face for radio, and he's doing such a great job behind the scenes. So thanks, Patrick. Great to work with you again, my friend.
There's an army of people behind the scenes that did invitations and connections as well.
So, and thank you, David. So Ashley, by the way, thank you. I know you did a lot of work. Kate, it was Kate Dillon's idea, so we gotta love Kate.
Lisa Grassfield was involved.
Right.
So thank you all. So my closing is a couple of things that Scott said, which is we got to be more transparent, which may include vulnerability. We may have to be more vulnerable and more transparent because we will lose trust and we will create panic when we fail to communicate, when we fail to show that we're all in this together, when we fail to show up and really think about empathetically how people are doing. I think we've got to get to the scenario planning. I would spend every day, and I literally am spending every day doing a little scenario planning for how I'm going to teach online, how I'm going to interact with my clients around the world, which requires us to innovate. Scott said it, but don't let this crisis go to waste. Let's figure out how to pivot so that, we're going to put the V in recovery as we start coming out of here, because there's going to be huge opportunities to capitalize, not the greed avarice side of capitalization, but there's wonderful opportunities to think about how to pivot your business. Porch said it. We got to play both defense and offense. We got to think deeply about what the future holds, and we really got to do this pretty deep scenario planning.
And I guess a couple of things I would just say again, you can't over communicate. Just constantly connecting with your loved ones as well as all the people at work, and be empathetic to where people are coming from. I think you can start almost any meeting with, how you guys feeling, what's going on in your world, what are you concerned about at the moment, what are you bringing into the room. I think those are really positive things to do. I guess the other thing, I know I can speak for Kerry, is we're going to keep monitoring all of the good stuff coming out. We're always open if you want to call or email us, whatever, with any of your questions. As usual, we're open for business.
The cell phone numbers.
Yeah, you know us, and we're here and want to support you in any way we can.
So there's a lot of thank yous streaming in. We've got a lot or a couple of really good questions, which maybe if we do this again, we can pick up. Dwayne McFadden would like to hear more about neuropsychology. Sam Glazer asked about being open and transparent and kind of what are the boundaries there, like how much empathy versus how much honest processing.
Call me Sam.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are very good questions. I want to close with this really great question to us from Adam Contos, who says, "What can we do to help you at DU?"
Think about that.
Stay curious,
Yeah.
stay safe.
I will,
Two lines.
I will just say that I think Adam, as the CEO of Remax, has done amazing things in using today's communication mechanisms, social media to communicate. He's got a far-flung organization in every country around the world, and he's done amazing things utilizing the communication tools we have today. Adam, I'd love to brainstorm with you about how we might use some of what you're doing. Adam produces podcasts and videos almost every day to keep his workforce. Love to maybe brainstorm with you a little bit about how we might, just benchmark a little bit of what you're doing for our own, as well as pass on some practices to other people, because you're doing a lot of great things. So,
And Adam's great about giving back to the community. So
Yeah.
thanks, Adam. Keep giving back.
So I'm going to come back on camera.
I'm going to get away from you, dude.
6 feet. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. There continues to be some different comments coming in, so we will make sure that we look at those even after we go off of air here. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We will follow up with an email to you with some content and some resources from this discussion, and amongst the executive ed and Daniel's team, we'll talk about what our next steps are, particularly related to this this program and this roundtable discussion. I do want to highlight for you that we are planning a series of webinars which will kick off in April. They'll be designed around different topics. We actually had that in the works long before coronavirus was a household issue. But those will pop up for you in April, and some of you may find that really, really useful and great content, and you will see Kerry and Scott featured on several of those. So on behalf of the University of Denver, Daniels College of Business, Executive Education, and kind of the whole team here, we thank you for giving us your time this afternoon. Hopefully you found this valuable. Thank you for being a very engaged audience. We look forward to
Taggers and everything.
Yeah, the executive MBA people.
Thank you.
Yes. I mean,
Guys.
Yeah, we're already getting like
Back door open.
going to transition to Corvell in the next couple of months.
Door
So,
No
closed.
upcoming webinar.
yes, they're asking for all kinds of documents. So he,
Call Kerry and say, you didn't say anything about the legislatures. Stop it. I want to know who's helping me today. These were all businesses that are still running. Oh, you should kind of like get off this.
no, I will talk to him.
Disconnect.
It's just
Disconnect.
like crazy. He doesn't share this. What's interesting is it's not like he comes back to me and says, hey, Chris,
That was great. That was really, really good. And
this
actually,
person, like,
it was so.
because he's doing
Hold on.
I mean, I don't know what it is.
Coming in, and so it actually worked. I thought.
Hi, Kerry.
who's that?
Like a secret boss.
It's Nina. Call me.
Okay, Nina.
Hello.
Nina, this was partly your idea.
I know, but nobody answered me on who's our connected legislatures to you for those of us who are closed down and need help today.
They pass through him first.
I'll call you later. Okay, bye.
I'm in there.
Stuff she asks me.
Macro forces.
You know what I liked